My true story. From Texas, I sold my wedding ring to help them. My son said, "That's it?" I just nodded, then took everything back. I carried the small wooden box up from my room, its finish worn smooth over decades, and placed it on the kitchen counter as the soft morning light filtered through the curtains. Nathan was already there, sipping black coffee with a look on his face that cut deeper than any blade. I opened the box and presented the wedding ring, its gold dulled but still whole, a piece of my past, a piece of my heart. "It's all I could do," I said quietly, voice steady, though my hands trembled underneath the table. Nathan leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "That's it. You pawned your dusty old wedding ring for what, $600? Mom, we're starting a business, not buying a used couch." The words landed like bricks. He stirred his coffee, disinterested now that his point was made. I swallowed the hurt. That ring was all I had left of William. Lele, standing by the sink, flicked a disapproving glance at me as she dried a cup with a dish towel. "If that's your big sacrifice," she said, voice smooth and cold, "maybe you should have stayed in the past with your dead husband." I felt the world shift beneath me. The kitchen ceiling might as well have been falling in. I wanted to speak, to defend my gesture, but my throat closed. All I could do was nod. Nathan launched in again, fists pressing flat onto the table. "You always said Dad built everything. Guess you didn't build shoot." He paused, letting the words hang. "So now, what did you build, Mom?" I swallowed again and reached for the ring, twirling it on my finger before closing the wooden box with deliberate care. I did not cry. If I had, they might have seen the vulnerability I had spent a lifetime learning to hide. My insides quivered. I felt my heart break in the shape of that ring, small, round, irrevocable. But I could not let tears soften me now. My eyes hardened to stone. Nathan sniffed and thrust his hand out. "Here, take this key." He slid a small silver key across the table, face turned away. "We installed new flooring in the ADU," he said. "I thought you'd prefer your own space." His tone was casual, but the message was unmissable. "Go away." This was about privacy, he said. Charity, convenience, all euphemisms for eviction. I looked down at the key and felt my pulse leap, heart pounding against my ribs like a restless bird. ADU, accessory dwelling unit. It was a polite term for the prefab space they had built in the yard. I had helped Nathan pour the foundation for his dream house. Now they offered me the shed behind it. I rose slowly, lifting the ring box to tuck it into my cardigan pocket, as if making peace with the separation. I let Nathan lead me to the back door without argument. Lele stepped ahead, pushing open the door. We walked past the patio, past his new garden, and past the small wooden structure he had dubbed my little fortress. It looked innocent enough from the outside, but when the door swung shut behind me, the smell hit me first. Gasoline, dust, stale air. Inside, a steel door stood open to reveal a clutter of paint cans, lawn chairs with ripped fabric, and gloomy shadows. A cot waited against the far wall, its thin mattress covered in a faded blanket and an old fan perched in the corner. There was no welcome in the place, only an unspoken command to disappear. I paused at the doorway, the cold concrete floor under my feet, hearing their voices shrink behind me. Nathan's last words, "We thought you'd like the privacy," echoed flat. "You can have the bed," he had said. "It's yours now." I closed my eyes, breathing in the stale air. The ADU, they called it. A name that felt like a label. Outsource Mom. I stood on the threshold, grasping at memories of the love and labor I had poured into this home. The paint we spread together, the breakfasts we shared at that kitchen table, the birthday cakes I iced for them on this very counter. And now I stood alone in a dusty cubicle, abandoned on a Sunday morning, as if I had never existed. I set the ring box on a small folding table and unpacked the blanket they provided. Each movement felt surreal, as though I were inhabiting someone else's life. I smoothed the blanket across the cot, dust motes dancing in the weak beam of sunlight tonight. I turned the fan on low and sat on the edge, laying the box beside me. I ran a fingertip over its carved wood, feeling every curve and scar that time had left. I thought of William and that promise he whispered under a sea of stars. "If they try to bury you, plant yourself deep in bloom." My throat tightened. Outside, the back door creaked open and closed. Nathan and Lele left without a word. I heard them walk away across the yard, voices fading, but voices still there, still speaking their judgment. I remained seated, my eyes fixed on the ring box. I had sold it to help support their dreams. They disdained it. They banished me. I closed my eyes and whispered to the empty room. I may be exiled, but I am not erased. I reached into my cardigan pocket and pressed my hand to the ring box. This was not the end. I would bloom again, even here, even starting from the cold concrete floor of an unwanted room. My head throbbed, not from anger, but from a determination so fierce it lit me from within. I would not leave, but first, I would remember, and then I would act. I remember the first time I walked into the construction office in the late 1960s. I was 23, fresh out of college, and the only woman in a sea of men in hard hats. My name was already known around the office for balancing ledgers, but what I didn't realize was how life would change the day William Hawthorne looked up from his desk and offered to walk me back to my car. That's how I first saw the kindness behind his broad shoulders, the integrity behind his steady hands. From that evening on, from the blueprints to the stock certificates, he taught me everything: how to see the structure of a balance sheet like the framework of a building, how to trust someone who earned that trust, how to invest not just with money, but with heart. Every night, after long days crunching numbers and scheduling building deliveries, we'd sit on the porch swing he built himself. Sometimes the Texas wind would carry the scent of honeysuckle across our yard. He would wrap his arm around me, warm and steady, and whisper, "If they forget what you gave, remember what you kept." I used to ask him what that meant, and he'd smile, reaching across the porch rail to take my hand. "Love is not what you release," he said slowly. "It's what you hold on to, even when time tries to steal it. That ring," he tapped the small gold band on my finger. "It's more than gold. It's witness. It remembers the dawns and the dusk. Don't let anyone erase that." We built more than a marriage. Together, we helped my company become one of the first to incorporate environmentally conscious timber framing for schools across Texas. We supported William's dream to bring affordable housing to small towns. Then came Nathan, our first pride, headstrong and bright like his father. And years later, Lele, with her passion for creativity and independence. I watched them grow. I supported them, sometimes quietly behind the scenes, but always there. I paid for Nathan's tuition at Baylor University. I took night accounting classes at night to ensure the mortgage stayed on track. I helped Lele with her cosmetic line, standing by at markets, zipping packaging, answering phone calls before dawn. When they needed capital to rent that tiny storefront she always dreamed about, I gave it without hesitation. I never asked for repayment. To me, it was love in action, proud, silent, grand in its simplicity. That golden wedding band on my finger became more than jewelry. It became a testament of sacrifice, of hope, of loyalty. My heart brimmed every time I stood at their podiums, Nathan with a diploma, Lele at her first product launch. They made me shine. And then came another dream, Nathan's dream to open a craft spirits bar, a place to honor William's legacy of old-world distilling traditions and his own Texan bravado. The grand opening date approached. He needed funds, some for renovations, some for permits. Amanda, his wife, was all in. I watched them pore over budgets late into the night, the glow of laptop screens painting shadows on their faces. They talked about branding, marketing, the long hours, and high risk. They talked about family. When they asked for help, I wanted to say yes more than anything. Because love had taught me, to give is to keep believing. So I took that ring many times to pawn shops on Main Street, the same places William and I once counted receipts. I swallowed my pride in quiet hush. I handed over that piece of gold and walked away with $600 in my coat pocket. I brought it home, hid it in an envelope, and handed it to Nathan. I told them, without drama, that I wanted to help. I wanted to invest in their dream. That ring had paid for dreams before, his college, her store, so why not this? Years of devotion passed through those $600. But that Sunday morning, when I offered the ring again, something shifted. Nathan did not thank me. He dismissed it. Amanda mocked me. They made it small, my gift, my love, my worth. I remember the way Nathan's eyes turned cold when he said, "That's it." The ring flashed in my pocket like a silent rebuke. I remembered William's words across time. "Remember what you kept." That morning, I felt he was teaching me again. I imagined his voice guiding me. Hold on to your truth. I realized that even love, when unguarded, can be taken for granted. Even loyalty can be treated like currency, spent until empty. It stung. Deeply. I walked to the mirror later that day in my bedroom, though they had made it plain I would not sleep there again. I dressed in my faded cardigan and pressed a hand to my chest. My heart didn't break, it hardened. I thought of the porch swing, of our years of partnership, of the investment we built together in love and labor. That ring wasn't the only thing I'd pawned. It was years of being seen, heard, valued. And now I saw that perhaps I had held too much, given too much, without keeping proper watch. I closed my eyes and felt William's memory in the weight of the ring, now gone but not lost. Its absence reminded me of everything I had done and everything they took for granted, and I felt that for the first time in years, I was not broken. I was clear. Maybe love isn't enough to tie two hearts together, but integrity binds something stronger still. When the afternoon light filtered through my curtains, I wrote in my notebook, "They remember what they took, but not what they were given." That's okay. There are new ways to build, ways that do not depend on gratitude from others. I did not cry. I did not scream. I only set the words down and waited, breath steadying with purpose. Because now I knew love keeps, but wisdom acts. That Sunday was a beginning. It was when I stopped being the wife of yesterday and became someone else entirely. They thought offering me shelter in the ADU was kind. Tomorrow I would show them the meaning of generosity that never demands repayment. I sat on the edge of the thin cot, the cool night air seeping through the cracked window of the ADU. I reached into my cardigan pocket and pulled out William's old leather-bound journal, yellowed with age and promise. The pages crackled as I turned to the end. There it was, scribbled in his precise handwriting, a 6-digit code. My pulse quickened. I had almost forgotten he always kept that journal close during construction meetings, the soft leather always smelling faintly of sawdust and ink. With trembling fingers, I found my way to the small safe, wedged into the floorboard beneath an old rug in our bedroom at home. This was my first night alone in this makeshift space that wasn't mine. I knew I couldn't sleep until I confirmed the journal's secret. It felt like a key passed down, a final lesson from William, the importance of keeping hidden things safe until their time. It was late, but I drove back quietly, the night road slick with moonlight. The house was dark and still. I found the rug, peeled it back, and knelt. My fingers traced the indentation in the floorboard. I pressed the code in one by one. The safe clicked. I braced myself. Inside wasn't cash or jewelry. It was better. A single folder stamped with William's company seal. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside lay certificates. 50,000 shares of Texas Heritage Construction, the very company William helped launch and championed throughout the decades. And based on its recent growth and IPO on the Austin Exchange, that ownership, my ownership, was worth nearly $800,000. I pressed the stock tracking app on my phone and captured the screen. $799,460.18. It was glowing on the display, silent confirmation of everything William had known, everything I'd contributed to and safeguarded, unspoken. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered the joy in his voice the night he explained to me what it meant. "This is legacy," he said, tapping the safe's edge. "Not gold, not paperwork. Real legacy." I had nodded and sighed with complete trust. Why would I question him? Why would I think otherwise now? Tears shimmered in my eyes, not from sadness, but from awareness, from strength. I whispered to myself. "You remembered, didn't you, Bill?" I slid the certificates back, carefully, reverently, as if laying down a sacred trust in a cradle. I sat in the empty kitchen long after dawn broke. I stirred my tea absent-mindedly. My mind moved in circles. They'd mocked the $600. They believed me powerless. But I was not powerless. I was the vault. I was more than they could see. I held the key to their future. And beyond that, I held the power to change lives beyond my own family. I opened my notebook and wrote, "They believed the pawnable, they did not see the legacy." I let the words settle in my chest. My fingers traced the quote from William once more. The truth blazed brighter than any hurt. Suddenly, purpose cloaked me like a second skin. This discovery was not revenge. It was reclamation of worth, of autonomy, of love's deeper promise. And so I finished my tea, packed the journal and a copy of the certificates neatly in a manila folder, and prepared to step back into the garage as dawn's light bled through its dusty windows. ADU or not, this night had changed everything. They had wanted to confine me. Instead, they had opened the door. I woke early the morning after I discovered William's stock certificates, chest tight with both fear and quiet exhilaration. I reached for my phone and dialed the number I had kept hidden for years, filed under a contact labeled simply CPA. When the voice on the other end answered, "Drake speaking," something shifted in me. Drake was a young friend from my early days as an accountant, sharp, ethical, and now a trusted attorney specializing in elder affairs. "I need your help, Drake," I said. "What I have, I need protected." By late morning, he was seated across from me at my kitchen table, the same kitchen that in decades past had witnessed celebrations, disappointments, and everything between. I slid the manila folder across to him. He opened it with careful attention, scanning the certificates and the trust documents I'd prepared under his guidance. "This is powerful," he said quietly, eyes steady. "It's legal, it's sound, and it's yours." "It needs to be more than mine," I said. "It needs to mean something." That afternoon I invited Nathan and Lele over for coffee. I set out biscotti and arranged 3 cups on our old wooden table. When they arrived, they looked puzzled at the invitation, her brow furrowed, his phone clutched in hand, but they sat anyway, crouched in the familiar chairs they had once called home. I motioned gently toward the folder. "I've arranged something," I said, keeping my tone soft but unwavering. "You two are starting a business. I'm proud of that. I want to invest in what matters next." Lele scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Mom, what is this?" She reached and flipped open the folder. Inside was the trust document. 50,000 shares, held in trust, designated for Women Rebuilding Texas, a statewide nonprofit I'd supported with my time when I was still consulting smaller firms. The trust named me and Drake as trustees, with the directive that the shares be used only to fund programs for women escaping abuse, re-entering the workforce, or rebuilding homes. The document also stated it was irrevocable. Once signed, it could not be reversed. Lele leapt to her feet, her face flushed. "Are you kidding me? You're giving that money away? That whole investment?" She jabbed a finger at the pages, incredulous. Nathan stayed seated, shock washing over him. He whispered, "Mom, you're taking it from your family." I met his gaze directly. My voice was calm. "I gave what I had. You mocked it when I pawned my ring. Now I give what I am." Lele's mouth opened, but no words came. Nathan swallowed, color pooling in his cheek. I kept looking at him. "Do you remember how you said I hadn't built anything? That morning I understood then that I had built more than I thought you saw. I built a life. I built this legacy that is not yours to claim." Silence pushed into the room like thick fog. Lele rifled through the folder, tears threatening in her eyes. Nathan's knuckles whitened on the table edge. I continued quietly. "This trust is for those who have nothing left. You have youth, you have energy, you have each other. I have these shares. Now they will support hope more than you and I ever could." He stood, pressing his palms flat on the table. "Mom, But I held up my hand. "Nathan, I did not invest so that you would one day say, 'That's it.' I invested because I believed you would know instinctively how to use what I gave. You talked over me like I was a note to be paid, not a partner." He closed his eyes. Lele slumped into a chair and mopped her face with her sleeve. Drake, standing politely by the doorway, cleared his throat softly, reminding them of his presence. I took a deep breath. "There is nothing left to discuss." I touched the trust papers gently. "The transfer will be complete by the end of the week." Drake nodded to me, but said nothing to them. His silence carried weight. He stepped back out of the room. I looked at Nathan. I saw pain, regret, but also curiosity. In that moment, he glimpsed something he hadn't expected. My resolve, my dignity, My power. I reached across and touched the old wedding ring I'd made into a handcrafted wooden replica, carved myself to symbolize renewal. I have turned every branch of this life into something living, I said. It's not just investment, it's inheritance, meant for those who have been overlooked. I stood up. Thank you for coming. I hope you will stay for coffee. They held their ground for a moment before nodding. We sat together in the quiet kitchen, coffee cups steam rising into the air. I did not ask for forgiveness. I just sat, calm, dignified, an unspoken promise radiating between us. I would never be taken for granted again. The morning sky was still gray when I arrived at the modest community center where Women Rebuilding Texas had arranged a small press event. A banner draped over folding chairs read, "Empowering Women, Restoring Lives." I felt the weight of those words, carrying decades of my own effort and faith. For this morning I would step out from behind the scenes. I clutched my purse in one hand and the manila folder in the other. Drake was beside me, calm support in a crisp suit. We stepped into the room where volunteers and board members bustled, arranging microphones and organizing seating. Cameras clicked and lights shone suddenly bright. I took a deep breath and met Drake's eyes. He nodded. The event began quietly, with a board member welcoming local press. Words spread. Today we celebrate an anonymous investment that will fund a new branch in the very neighborhood Nathan and Amanda hoped to build their bar. Then I was introduced. My heart stuttered when they said, "Today's donor wishes to remain anonymous and will not be appearing in person." I eased toward the podium to applause, eyes turned, cell phones lifted. I waited. The crowd hushed at last. The organizer's voice echoed in the small room. "Mrs. Myers, would you like to say a few words?" I stepped up, inhaled deeply and offered a quiet nod. This was my moment. I cleared my throat and began. I'm not a visionary. I'm not a celebrity. I'm a widow, a mother, and in my younger days a calculator. I used to balance ledgers for construction firms and calculate budgets for my family. Today I am part of something bigger. I am a vault no thief can crack. I heard cameras flash. I felt invisible walls dissolve. My voice softened. When I first supported Women Rebuilding Texas, I did so quietly, modestly. But I've come to believe that when something works, you lift the roof for it. I paused. So today, I'm proud to support this organization openly. I'm proud to say that those shares were not just stock. They were memories, values, a life's work. And they belong to you now. I gestured toward the banner. Use them to rebuild, to heal, to plant roots that last. A reporter from the Texas Tribune asked, "Mrs. Myers, can you tell us why you chose to remain anonymous until now?" I smiled, gentle but firm. Because this is not about me. It's about lives repaired. Silence can be loud as you let it. Today I spoke because I trusted these women to rebuild what trauma stole. As the final round of applause tapered off, Merlin stepped down from the podium, her wooden ring catching the warm wash of overhead lights. A small group of women surrounded her with soft thanks, clasped hands, watery smiles. But her eyes had already shifted toward the back of the room. There they were. Nathan and Laylee stood near the exit doors, out of place among the folding chairs and flyers. He looked shell-shocked, shoulders slumped, hands deep in the pockets of his tailored slacks. Laylee's arms were crossed tightly, lips drawn in a hard, angry line. Both stared as if they'd just seen a ghost rise. A volunteer cleared a path, and for a moment, everything around Marilyn went still. The murmurs faded, the cameras clicked less. Only the space between mother and son remained. She approached without hurry. Her steps were measured, ring tapping faintly against her side. Nathan stepped forward first. "Mom," he began, voice low, gravelly, "why didn't you tell us it was this big?" Merlin stopped 2 paces from him, her gaze held steady. "Because you never asked." Lillet scoffed. "We didn't ask because we didn't expect a betrayal to be gift-wrapped in press releases." "That's not what this is," Merlin replied, calm but unyielding. Layla stepped in closer. "You could have invested in us, helped us build something real." "I did," Merlin said, her voice now like cool stone. "I built your college degrees, your business foundation, your home. You mocked the last thing I gave, so I gave the next thing to women who wouldn't." Nathan flinched. But you made us look like fools, Layla hissed. Everyone saw, everyone knows. Merlin nodded slowly. Good. Maybe now they'll stop pretending your cruelty was just stress. Nathan opened his mouth, closed it again. We were wrong, he muttered. I see that now. Merlin softened, just a shade. Her shoulders didn't relax, but her tone quieted. I didn't want to embarrass you. I wanted to protect what mattered. And this room, these women, they matter. Layli shook her head, muttering. You're a saint now. Huh? No, Merlin said, finally letting the fatigue show in her eyes. I'm just a woman who remembers everything, including what it felt like when my son said I didn't build anything. Nathan looked up, tears threatening. You did. You built everything. I just didn't know how to say it until now. She held his gaze for a long moment, then turned to Lele. I didn't mean to destroy your dream, she said. I just stopped funding my own erasure. Lele's face tightened, but she said nothing. Merlin reached into her bag and handed Nathan a folded card. There's a number inside. A woman named Carla at this organization runs small business mentorship. Maybe you can still make that bar, but this time on your merit. He took it like a sacred thing, hands trembling. Mom, do you think you'll ever forgive us? Merlin looked toward the women still clapping near the exit. I don't need to, she said softly. You'll do that for yourselves every time you remember what it cost to forget me. Then she turned, wooden ring glinting as she stepped back into the light. And for the first time, Nathan didn't follow. He watched her go, this quiet woman in her 70s, dressed in dusty blue, who had just moved the whole room without raising her voice. He whispered, She's not broken. Lele's lips pressed tight. No, she said, she never was. Then came the big reveal. Local news interrupted coverage to display a headline. Local widow turned investor backs women rebuilding after trauma, her photo beside it. I watched as cameras turned back to me. I nodded once, accepting their gaze. Nathan and Amanda were in the back row, both pale. I saw panic, confusion, even some grief. They exchanged quick whispers. I didn't look down. I didn't judge them. I only held my posture and my purpose. The event closed with applause that warmed the room. Women stepped forward to hug me, their eyes glistening. Board members approached, gratitude genuine. I stepped away from the podium, clutching my purse, walking toward Drake and the exit. Thank you, he whispered. I nodded. Outside, reporters surrounded me. From one, I repeated a line I'd prepared. I believe in legacy. I believe in love. And I believe in investing where it means something, not just to me, but to many. They asked, will you sign the deed transfer today? I nodded. I will. Nathan and Lele emerged too, waiting by the door. I walked past briefly without stopping, knowing they would come later. The morning air had shifted, crackling with accountability. I stood there a moment, closed my eyes, and thought of William, the ring, the promises, the porch advice. I felt him with me, smiling softly in the breeze. This was more than money. This was truth. This was dignity restored. I turned and walked away with my head high, stepping into a new legacy, not built on blood or shame, but built on integrity and hope. I arrived at the kitchen later that afternoon to find it uncommonly still. Nathan stood at the island, one hand pressed into the cool granite countertop, his phone cradled to his ear. His face was tight, shadows under each eye. I answered the ping of the front door, opening and closing, but kept to the corner, waiting silently. This is unbelievable, I heard him say quietly. Yes, I understand that region is already funded, but we built our proposal around being first. Yes, I'm asking if I can reapply. I'll send over more documentation. Thank you. He ended the call and leaned fully into the counter, shoulders shaking. Long seconds passed. No sound. I knew he was holding himself together. Lele flounced in seconds later, her face flushed as she slammed her purse onto the chair. She rubbed her temples and looked between Nathan and me. What happened? She demanded. Nathan shook his head until I felt the ache reverberate in my chest. Maybe we were betrayed. Because the state, apparently your donation to that women's center counted as funding for the area. Our site is already invested in. Lele scoffed, stepping so close I could feel the tautness in her posture. She set us up to fail from the start, she spat. First you betray us by making that donation, and now we're blocked? We've poured everything into this dream and she couldn't care less. Nathan turned slowly to face us, dark rings under tired eyes. This was supposed to be our way forward, he murmured. We spent every penny from the ring pawn and my 401k. Now we're denied because they think someone else took our slot. Layla glared at me. Mum, don't pretend you didn't. I stepped forward, but gently. Layla, I said, voice soft, it wasn't like that. She shook her head, repeating, You set us up. Nathan bowed his head. Maybe this was a mistake. I walked over and picked up Max's leash from the counter. He had followed me in, tail wagging with concern. I hooked it loosely around his paw, and I could feel Max's warm weight against my hip as I stroked his fur. His big golden head rose to nuzzle my hand. I closed my eyes. Lele threw her purse aside and pushed a chair against the table with enough force to crack a leg. Well, because she wanted applause. Her voice cracked, and she ran a hand over her face. I should never have believed she actually cared. Nathan let out a breath so deep it sounded like heartbreak. Lele, enough. I knelt beside Max. He sat quietly, as though offering me courage. In that moment, I could have snapped, defended, explained. But I didn't. I patted Max's head and stood again, calm as light. Why did I give? I asked, not to them, but to the silent kitchen. I gave because I trusted that if I stepped aside, others could step forward. Lele scoffed again, but said nothing. I slid off the leash and hugged Max, feeling the steady, unconditional softness of his body. Turning back to them, I said, If this is about failing, then yes, we failed. Our failure is ours, not theirs. I looked to Nathan. This world is bigger than our business plan, bigger than one ring, one idea, one small glass of spirits. And I believe your idea still has value. Nathan looked up, pain and regret flickering in his eyes. I said gently, You needed money. I gave it to a broader purpose, one with roots deeper than a bar can dig. You needed capital, yes, but maybe what you also needed was a community that supports each other's heart. He swallowed. Mom, I'm sorry. Lele shut her mouth, eyebrow raised, watching. I moved from the island and sat at the table, Max drifting to sit by my feet. I am sorry too, I said softly. Not for giving, but for believing you were ready, Lele balked. Ready for what? To be trusted. I paused and looked at her. Money isn't just coins, it's trust you deposit. I needed to protect it. You needed to earn it. Nathan straightened. We'll come back. I don't know how, but we'll try again. I held his gaze. Good, but next time, start with real value. Not just a logo, not just a permission slip. Build trust. That can't be brokered, it's earned. Lele opened her mouth, closed it again. Then she looked away, jaw working. Nathan scooped up the empty coffee mug from earlier and carried it to the sink. He glanced over his shoulder. I'll start rewriting the business plan, he said. We'll look for other sources. Outside, cars passed. I listened to the quiet hum. Max leaned into me, golden fur brushing my leg. I thought of William telling me that trust was more durable than stone, more portable than gold. I placed a steady smile on my face. Max and I will help where we can, I said, but this time you two stand on your own. Nathan nodded firmly. Lele stared at the tabletop for a long moment before she looked up. Fine, she said quietly. We'll do it our way. I rose, smoothing my cardigan. That's all I can ask. Max shook himself and wandered to Nathan, who reached down to scratch behind his ears. I watched the two of them connect. Sometimes falling hard is the only way to stand again. The kitchen was no longer silent but alive, not with anger but with possibility, and I finally smiled. I arrived at the bank just after midday. The signage read, Merlin Mayers and Women Rebuilding Texas on the laminated notice board for routine system checks. I watched Lele push through the glass doors. She wore a sharp blouse and designer purse, the very image of confidence, but as she approached the desk, I could see hesitation in the stiffness of her shoulders. She handed over her ID and the withdrawal form for her inheritance account. The teller nodded and said, I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's no active account in your name. Miss Mayers transferred it last week. Lele's fingers tightened around the form. She blinked, fought to keep her voice steady. Transferred? What do you mean? This was set aside for me. The teller tapped on the computer, eyes softening. She retrieved a sealed envelope stamped Texas Elder Trust, Women Rebuilding, TX. According to our records, the beneficiary designation was changed last Tuesday. The funds were distributed in full. Laylee's face drained of color. She reached for the envelope. May I see a copy of the transfer confirmation? The teller slid a printout across the counter with a polite nod. Laylee barely glanced at it before closing her fingers around it like it was a lifeline. She turned and stormed out, the envelope tucked under her arm. Moments later, my phone buzzed. I answered immediately, already knowing who it was. You betrayed us, Laylee's voice cracked through the line, a gust of hurt and defiance. I exhaled slowly, steadying the tremor in my own chest. No, Laylee, I responded softly. You are talking about yourself. And that was enough. She was silent. Then the line clicked. I didn't follow her to the car. I didn't call back. I just stood, touching the wooden replica of my wedding ring tucked in my purse. It reminded me that some treasures wear differently than gold. Later that afternoon, I heard the soft knock on my front door. I moved toward it slowly. Anticipation and regret blended in my heart. Nathan opened it, pockets slightly splayed. He was carrying the stamped envelope from the bank. His hands shook as he handed it to me. He met my eyes with raw vulnerability. Mom, I understand, he said, voice low, fragile. Do you forgive us? I didn't answer. I simply placed my hand, bare, honest, over the wooden ring sculpture I held between us. My thumb brushed its surface once. My silence spoke louder than any words. Nathan's shoulders relaxed. He sighed. A release, a relief. He stepped inside, gently closing the door behind him. We stood side by side in the late afternoon light filtering through the curtains. Max padded softly into the room and circled at our feet. Nathan reached down and stroked his golden fur, eyes closed a moment in reflection. I looked at him. I could feel the shift in him, recognition, acceptance. He understood the lesson now. The weight of loss, yes, but also the power of choice. You don't need to have the power to forgive. Sometimes it's enough to let someone see their own reflection in what they've done. Nathan spoke in a whisper. Thank you, Mom, for everything. He swallowed hard. Both of us, we missed it. I didn't say, I forgive you. That wasn't what I needed anymore. Instead, I simply closed my eyes and allowed the quiet to fill the space between us. Max nuzzled Nathan's leg. Nathan leaned down and hugged him. I touched the wooden ring again, gently. I felt William's calm voice in that moment. If they forget what you gave, remember what you kept. I kept this. My dignity, my integrity, my love. Not taken, not gone, just held. And in that shared silence, I felt more whole than I had in years. That day, forgiveness wasn't spoken, it was felt. And sometimes that is enough. I logged onto the Zoom screen a few minutes early, quietly straightening the stack of note cards beside my teacup. My background showed a soft sunset glow through the balcony. Max curled at my feet. Around the virtual room, over 60 faces appeared, women from across Texas, survivors of loss, loneliness, and betrayal. The title flashed at the top, Women Rebuilding Texas, Session 1. My voice caught at first. Good evening, everyone. You think you're broken? I thought I was broken. Then I realized I wasn't broken. I was buried, and now I'm digging out. A hush fell over the gallery of faces. I watched shy smiles appear, shoulders relax, hope spark. Later, I would learn that a 23-year-old named Marisol typed in the chat, "Thank you, Mrs. Myers. Today I sent in my resignation. I am leaving the man who has hurt me for 4 years." I paused as I read the words aloud, voice steady. "Marisol, that takes unbelievable strength." "You're not alone," she wrote back in a private message. "You gave me those words." That moment, seeing her words before me, made the night real. This wasn't a speech, it was a bridge. A calm professor from UT Austin introduced himself on camera. "Merlin, I teach narrative ethics. I believe your story resonates beyond your state. May I include your script and voice in my semester syllabus?" I nodded, though he could not see. 11 faculty and students appeared in response with tiny thumbs-up icons. That simple gesture affirmed the reach. My journey was theirs too now. Meanwhile, notifications pinged on my phone. The quiet Texas widow who changed everything. New article propagated by the Chronicle of Aging. A short clip of me speaking was shared on TikTok, garnering 24,000 views and thousands of supportive comments. So brave. My mom needed to hear this. Healing starts when we remember. I scrolled with mild surprise, but my heart warmed. What started with a pawned ring had grown into a ripple of resilience. I cleared my throat and continued softly. When my world shrank, when I was told to give my room, my pride, my value, I learned the hard way that dignity doesn't live in bricks or bank accounts. It lives in action, in reclaiming buried parts of ourselves. One woman asked in the Q&A, "How do you hold on to strength when their words cut deep?" I took a breath. I remind myself, hurt is not truth. Their words revealed their fear, their limitation. They didn't break me, they unshielded me. Another question, how did you forgive your own children? I paused. I didn't, not all the way. Forgiveness isn't given, it comes when the hurt no longer has control. You don't have to fix everything for forgiveness to happen. Max stirred on screen, yawned lazily. I smiled. Even my golden old chap here reminds me. Gentleness heals. The session neared an hour. I closed with one last thing. Sometimes our heart can be the vault no thief can crack. You are vaults. You contain resilience they cannot steal. Do not let your survival be your silence. The gallery erupted in applause. Reactions. Chat flooded with hearts and thank yous. I switched off the camera and sat quietly. Max nudged me. I leaned down, whispered, "We did something good tonight." Within a week, journalists from Texas Tribune and Morning Brew requested interviews. I spoke of reclaiming what was dismissed, of transforming a pawned ring into fuel for wider healing. Media outlets called it a paradigm shift in elder empowerment. Women across the state wrote to me, grandmothers, single moms, daughters, sharing that they too found courage to name hurt and take steps forward. Some were fleeing abusive relationships, others faced financial coercion. One woman in Houston wrote, "Your story gave me permission to cut ties with the family that used me for my inheritance." I responded with voice and letter tokens, "You are not invisible. Your life is worth more than their indifference." They started calling me informally on Zoom, Grandma Merlin. It felt right. Age is not weakness. It's accumulated resilience, memory, wisdom. I sent a few copies of my wooden wedding ring replica to a poet in Marfa and a teacher in Houston. The ring traveled, became a symbol in community workshops. Remember what you kept. One evening, I sat in my wicker chair as the sun dipped behind live oaks. Max at my side, I slipped the wooden ring onto my thumb. It fit exactly. An echo of the past, a promise to the future. I whispered to the quiet sky. I did not just survive. I outlived the insult. The words warmed me like last golden rays. In that hush, I reflected. The ring had been a token of love and life. Pawned, it became my weapon, then a symbol of transformation. The shares held purpose. My children learned loss, bluntly but surely, and I gained a community, a mission. Page by page, I began drafting a guide for elders. Vaults unlocked, reclaiming worth after betrayal. Not a memoir, but a map. For those who thought they were dusted away by time, for those whose voices were muffled behind younger stories. I would speak again, in workshops and talks. If you saw yourself in this story, whether as a daughter, mother, grandmother, or neighbor, please share this video. Send it to someone who needs permission to speak, to remember, to rise. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Together, let's build places where wisdom is honored, dignity is protected, and survival turns into purpose. Because hope isn't born only in victory, it grows in reclaiming what was taken. From Texas, with love.